If you're an Aquarius and money has felt not blocked, just quietly unfinished, then listen closely. Because between January 10th and 12th, something shifts. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the exact way real breakthroughs begin when no one else is watching. This isn't about sudden luck. It's about something you set in motion a long time ago finally starting to respond. If life has been asking you to wait, to trust, to hold your ground a little longer, this moment didn't come to test you. It came to meet you. If this already feels personal, type "I'm ready" in the comments, not for anyone else, just as a quiet agreement with yourself. And stay with me, because what's opening now isn't just about money. It's about the version of you that's finally ready to receive what matches who you are now. You know, there's a certain moment in life when curiosity fades. Not because you've lost wonder, but because you've lived long enough to know that not everything meaningful arrives with noise. And this is one of those moments. If you're listening now, it isn't because you were bored or scrolling or killing time. It's because something in you paused. Something recognized the tone before the words even landed. By this point in your life, you don't chase signs anymore. You listen for resonance, for that subtle feeling that says, "This isn't new information, this is recognition." Aquarius has always walked a few steps ahead of the room. You see patterns before they're named. You sense shifts before they're visible. And because of that, you've spent long stretches of your life moving alone, doing the right thing quietly, trusting ideas before they were safe, giving energy where no one was clapping yet. That kind of path leaves marks, not dramatic ones, just a low, familiar tiredness. The kind that comes from doing your best and still wondering, in the quiet hours, did any of this actually land? Maybe you've asked yourself that without words. Not out of doubt, but out of honesty. Am I building something real, or am I just getting good at waiting? January 10th through the 12th doesn't arrive to answer that with fireworks. It comes like a gentle hand on your back. A subtle recalibration. The kind you only notice when you stop pushing for proof. There's a reason this shift doesn't announce itself loudly. Because you're not meant to react to it. You're meant to recognize it. At this stage, you don't need motivation. You don't need promises. You need confirmation that the ground beneath you is solid. That the time you spent holding your integrity, your patience, your vision wasn't a detour. And here's the part most people never say out loud. Being early is lonely. Being steady is exhausting. And being right before the turn can feel indistinguishable from being wrong. Have you ever noticed how the most important shifts in your life didn't happen when you were trying to change everything, but when you finally stopped forcing the timeline and stayed present anyway? That's the energy moving around you now. Not urgency. Not pressure. A quiet internal alignment. The kind that doesn't ask you to do more, only to stop questioning the ground you're standing on. If you've been feeling a strange mix of calm and anticipation lately, like something is arranging itself just out of view, that's not imagination. That's awareness catching up to timing. So let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you trusted that your way of moving through the world didn't need fixing, only patience? Stay with me, because once you recognize why you're here now, what begins to unfold next isn't about effort at all. And once that quiet recognition settles in, something else begins to shift beneath the surface, not in your thoughts first, but in your body, in the way you breathe when you think about money now. For a long time, money hasn't felt dramatic for you. It hasn't felt exciting or terrifying either. It's felt suspended, like a current that slowed, not because it was wrong, but because it was waiting for the right channel to open. That's the part most people misunderstand. They think financial movement arrives with noise, with urgency, with risk. But for someone like you, it never has. What's happening now feels quieter than that, almost unremarkable on the outside. And that's exactly why it's real. You may notice it in small, almost forgettable moments, a number that finally clears. A message that arrives later than expected, but somehow right on time. A conversation that warms again after years of polite distance. Or an idea you once set down, not because it failed, but because you outgrew the version of yourself who first imagined it. And now it fits again. At this stage of life, money doesn't respond to force. It responds to coherence, to clarity, to the kind of steadiness that comes from knowing what you will and will not carry anymore. You're not meant to gamble with your future now. You're meant to recognize where value has already been forming quietly under your attention, your discipline, your restraint. That's why this shift doesn't feel like chasing. It feels like alignment catching up. There's something deeply Aquarius about that. You've never been motivated by the quick win. You care about systems, longevity, meaning. And when moves toward you from that place, it doesn't rush in, it integrates. Have you noticed how your relationship with effort has changed? How you no longer want to trade your peace for progress? That isn't laziness, that's maturity. At this point, money arrives not because you leap, but because you've become someone it can stay with. This is where the real shift lies. Not in a sudden increase, but in a quiet correction. A sense that things are no longer leaking energy. That what flows out now has a way of returning. You might find yourself less anxious about timing, less reactive to comparison, more interested in sustainability than speed. And strangely enough, that's when movement begins again. Not because you asked louder, but because you stopped questioning your worth in the asking. Here's a thought to sit with. What if the reason things slowed before was so you wouldn't build something that required you to abandon yourself to maintain it? What if this phase isn't about earning more, but about finally earning in a way that doesn't cost you your nervous system? That's the kind of wealth that lasts, the kind that grows roots. So if something familiar is resurfacing now, don't dismiss it as the past knocking again. It isn't. It's the future recognizing that you're ready to hold it differently. Stay with this feeling. Because once money begins to move without pressure, the next layer that opens has nothing to do with numbers at all. And as that sense of steadiness begins to take hold, something else quietly loosens inside you. It's subtle, almost tender, like realizing you're no longer holding your breath. There's a weight you've carried for a long time, not visible to others. A quiet question that returns late at night, when the noise fades and the world stops asking things of you. Why does it feel like everyone else arrived earlier while you took the long way around? You don't say it out loud, you never have, but you've felt it. That subtle ache of wondering if your timing was off, if you misread a door, if you waited too long to step forward. Here's the truth most people won't tell you. Aquarius lives ahead of the clock, but moves through life at a different tempo. You don't rush because rushing would disconnect you from what's real. You don't leap just to be seen. You observe, you test the structure. You feel the integrity of things before you build on them. From the outside, that can look like delay. From the inside, it's discernment. What if you were never late at all? What if you were timed? Time to mature before expanding. Time to understand value before holding resources. Time to develop emotional range before carrying responsibility that affects others. There's a reason so many people shine early and burn out quietly. They arrive before they know who they are, before they know how to protect their energy, before they understand what success actually costs. You didn't take the straight line. You took the intelligent one. By now, you've seen enough to know that recognition without alignment feels hollow. That achievement without peace becomes a cage. That applause fades faster than self-respect. And somewhere along the way, without realizing it, you stop chasing proof. You stop needing to be validated on schedule. That's when the internal clock recalibrated. It's no accident that momentum begins to feel different now. After 35. After 40. When urgency softens and clarity sharpens. At this point in life, success doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to fit. Into your nervous system. Into your values. Into the life you're actually living, not the one you were told you should want. You're no longer trying to arrive. You're choosing where to stay. And that changes everything. So if a part of you still wonders why it took this long to feel steady, to feel capable without strain, to feel ready without fear, I want you to hear this gently. You weren't behind. You were becoming. Becoming someone who doesn't collapse under expansion. Someone who can receive without guilt. Someone who can hold abundance without losing their center. Let me ask you something quietly, without pressure. If your life had unfolded faster, would you have been able to keep your soul intact? Sit with that. Because what's opening now isn't late. It's precise. And the part of you that survived the waiting is the part that will know exactly what to do when the next door opens. And once you stop questioning your timing, something else begins to surface. It arrives quietly, almost shy, like a memory you didn't know you were still carrying. You've always been generous in ways that don't show up on receipts. You gave ideas before they were safe. You shared time when you barely had enough for yourself. You offered kindness without keeping score. You explained things clearly, patiently, even when no one asked you to. And often, nothing seemed to come back. No thank you that stayed. No recognition that lasted. No immediate return. That can leave a mark. A quiet one. The kind that makes you wonder if giving was a mistake, or if being open cost you more than it should have. But here's the part most people never see. Energy does not return the way ego expects it to. It returns the way truth does. What's coming back now may not wear the same face. It may not carry the same name. But it holds the same essence of what you once released without certainty. Someone who watched you from a distance suddenly remembers your voice. A person who learned from you quietly reappears with an opportunity that feels oddly aligned. A skill you developed years ago, almost as a side note to life, now fits perfectly into a world that finally understands its value. This is not coincidence. It's circulation. Aquarius gives differently. You give ahead of time. You invest before the culture catches up. You plant seeds in soil that looks empty because you can already see what it will become. For a long while, it may have felt like nothing happened. But things were moving underground, forming roots, waiting for the right conditions. Now the return begins, not as repayment, accidents. You're not being paid back for what you gave. You're being matched by what you became while giving. And that distinction matters. Because this time, what arrives doesn't drain you. It doesn't ask you to overextend. It meets you where you are now, with clearer boundaries, stronger self-respect, and a deeper understanding of your own worth. Let me ask you something softly. If everything you gave was lost, would you still be who you are today? Probably not. And that's why none of it was wasted. The universe isn't returning your effort. It's returning your alignment. And as this realization settles in, notice how your body responds. There's less urgency, less need to prove, more trust in quiet momentum. This is the moment when giving and receiving finally feel balanced. Not because you demand it, but because you no longer abandon yourself to earn it. Stay present with this feeling. Because the next openings will require discernment, not effort. And the Aquarius who once gave endlessly is now learning how to receive without shrinking, without guilt, without explanation. What's coming back to you now isn't a favor, it's a reflection, and when you finally feel that balance returning, something inside you exhales. Not relief exactly, more like space. You've lived long enough to know that intensity isn't the same as depth, that noise doesn't equal meaning. And at this point in your life, you're not looking for more stimulation, you're looking for steadiness. There's a quiet reset happening now, not forced, not dramatic. Just a gentle recalibration of what you allow to live inside your emotional body. Between January 10th and 12th, you may notice your reactions soften, not because you care less, but because you finally care enough to protect your inner climate. Things that used to pull you into overthinking no longer hook the same way. Old emotional loops lose their grip. You begin to see, very clearly, what nourishes you and what simply drains your energy without giving anything back. This clarity is new, and it's precious. For a long time, you carried emotions like responsibilities. You held space for others. You processed what wasn't yours. You stayed present even when it cost you rest. Now something changes. You don't shut down. You don't harden. You simply stop carrying what was never meant to be permanent. From that place of inner quiet, connection starts to feel different. Someone from the past may resurface, not with chaos, not with unfinished drama, but with a softer tone, more honesty, less projection. Or someone entirely new appears, unassuming, grounded, real. Not here to impress you, not here to fix you. Just present. What matters is how your body responds, not the story, not the potential. The nervous system doesn't lie. A connection that's right for you now doesn't accelerate your heart in panic. It slows your breathing. It gives you room to think. It lets you be yourself without performing clarity or strength. At this stage, emotional maturity isn't about detachment. It's about resonance. You no longer bond through intensity. You bond through safety, through shared silence, through mutual respect for time and energy. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you felt calm after interacting with someone, instead of depleted? That feeling is becoming your new compass. You're learning that peace is not boring. It's intelligent. It preserves creativity. It sustains vision. It allows you to show up consistently, not just passionately. And as your emotional world steadies, everything else benefits. Your work becomes cleaner. Your decisions sharper. Your presence more magnetic without effort. This reset isn't about removing emotion. It's about right-sizing it. Letting feelings inform you, not overwhelm you. You're not becoming less sensitive. You're becoming regulated. And that's the kind of healing that lasts. Stay with this softness. Because what unfolds next requires a calm center. Not urgency, not defense. Just clarity, breathing easily, ready to recognize what feels like home when it finally stands in front of you. And from that calm place inside, something else becomes unmistakably clear. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It simply settles in your chest like a knowing. You've spent enough years believing that effort alone would eventually be enough. That if you stayed patient, flexible, accommodating, the world would meet you halfway. But what begins to shift now is not how hard you work. It's how you stand. Money, at its core, responds to posture. Not physical posture, but internal alignment. The way you occupy space. The way you speak about yourself when no one is correcting you. The way you decide what is acceptable and what quietly crosses a line. For a long time, you made yourself smaller to stay open. You explained your worth instead of assuming it. You adjusted your value so others could feel comfortable. That phase is dissolving, not in anger, not in rebellion, but in clarity. You begin to notice subtle changes in how you move through conversations. You answer without overqualifying. You state your needs without rehearsing apologies. You pause instead of rushing to fill silence. And strangely, the world responds. Opportunities arrive differently, not asking for discounts on your time, not testing how much you will tolerate, but meeting you at the level you quietly decided was non-negotiable. This is not confidence as performance. This is self-respect as baseline. At this stage in life, you understand that money doesn't reward effort alone. It reflects how much you trust yourself to hold what you ask for. When you stop seeking permission to be paid well, when you stop explaining why your boundaries exist, when you stop lowering expectations to avoid discomfort, the environment adjusts around you. Not immediately, but unmistakably. People sense it before they can articulate it. There is less negotiation, less testing, more directness. Because you are no longer signaling doubt, this is where things become practical. Grounded. Very Aquarius in the real world, you start reviewing the quiet details, the prices you name, the limits you set, the language you use when describing your work, your experience, your value, not to inflate them, to align them. And that alignment carries weight. Let me ask you something gently. If someone treated your time the way you treat it now, would you feel respected? That question alone recalibrates more than strategy ever could. This isn't about chasing money. It's about becoming someone money can stay with. Someone who doesn't overextend to prove worth. Someone who doesn't collapse under responsibility. Someone who understands that value held with integrity multiplies naturally. You're not becoming rigid, you're becoming clear. And clarity is magnetic. As this settles, notice how your decisions feel steadier. Less emotional charge. More grounded certainty. You don't need to convince anyone anymore. You simply show up as someone who knows what they offer and what it costs to access it. That shift is already working on your behalf, quietly, consistently. And what opens next will require this level of self-regard. Because what's coming is designed to meet you exactly where you are now. And when you begin to stand in that clarity, movement no longer feels urgent. It feels intentional. This is important to notice. Because the energy around you now is not asking for effort. It's asking for accuracy. You don't need to do more. You don't need to chase momentum. What's required during these days is a single, well-placed step. Think of it like adjusting the course of a ship. One small shift at the helm changes the entire destination. No drama, no rush. Between January 10th and 12th, your intuition becomes very practical. Not mystical, not vague. Clear in a grounded way that feels almost ordinary. You may feel drawn to reopen something you once set aside without closure. An email you never sent. A proposal that didn't land at the time. An idea that felt premature back then, but suddenly fits the world as it is now. There's no pressure to revive everything. Just notice what no longer feels heavy when you look at it again. That's the signal. Sometimes the right movement is a conversation, not confrontational, not rehearsed, just honest. The kind of conversation where you say what's true without trying to control the outcome. Where you listen without preparing defense. Where clarity matters more than agreement. And sometimes, the step is internal. A decision you've delayed not because you didn't know what to do, but because you were waiting to feel safer being who you've already become. What's different now is that fear no longer runs the process. It may still be present, but it's no longer in charge. This is how real turning points begin, not with bold declarations, but with small actions taken without self-betrayal. Let me ask you something quietly. If you weren't afraid of disrupting the old version of your life, what would you move first? That answer doesn't need to be shared. It just needs to be honored. Aquarius often waits for certainty before acting. But certainty doesn't come first anymore. Alignment does. When something feels clean, simple, and strangely calm, that's your cue. No pushing, no forcing. Just a step that says, I trust where I'm standing now, and here's the part most people miss. Once you take that step, the next one reveals itself naturally. Not all at once. Not as a master plan. Life responds to movement when the movement is true. You don't need to prove readiness. Your restraint already has. So move gently. Move honestly. Move without the weight of outcome. Because this window isn't about speed. It's about direction. And the Aquarius who knows their worth doesn't rush into the future. They walk toward it with presence, with intention, and with the quiet confidence that they no longer abandon themselves to get there. Stay close to that feeling. It will guide you better than any strategy ever could. And after that quiet movement, there's a moment of stillness, not emptiness, completion. This is where many people expect fireworks, a surge, something unmistakable. But that's not how your era begins. It begins the way real things do, without announcement, without pressure, with a calm sense of readiness that doesn't need witnesses. You're not crossing into something new by force. You're arriving because your inner world can finally hold it. There's a difference. For so long, life felt like preparation. Lessons layered on top of lessons. Experiences that shaped you quietly, sometimes painfully, without immediate payoff. Now you can feel it. That subtle internal alignment. The feeling of being steady enough to receive without grasping. Without fear of losing yourself in the process. This is what maturity feels like. Not certainty. Capacity. You're no longer asking the world to prove anything to you. You're simply open to what fits, what respects your time, what honors your energy. And that openness is powerful. Because abundance that arrives through readiness doesn't overwhelm, it integrates. It finds you in moments of calm, in decisions made without urgency, in opportunities that don't require you to abandon yourself to accept them. You're not stepping into a louder life. You're stepping into a truer one. Let that sink in. There's nothing to chase here, nothing to convince yourself of. Just a quiet agreement with the version of you who has survived, learned, softened, and clarified. So if it feels right, not as a promise, not as a belief you have to defend, but as a simple acknowledgement, you can say this inwardly. I am ready to receive what matches who I am now. Notice how your body responds to that sentence. No forcing, no expectation, just presence. This closing isn't an ending, it's a threshold. One you step across not because you were pushed, but because you're prepared. And if something in you feels seen by these words, if you felt yourself slow down and recognize your own truth, you're not alone in that experience. You don't need to explain it, you don't need to justify it. If you want to mark this moment quietly, you can leave a simple comment. I am ready. I receive aligned abundance. Not for validation. Just as a signal to yourself that you're listening. Stay with this calm. Carry it forward. Because this era doesn't demand your urgency. It responds to your presence. And from here, everything that arrives will know exactly where to find you. And before you leave this space, I want you to notice something quietly. You're not walking away the same person who pressed play at the beginning. Nothing dramatic changed. And yet something settled. That's how real shifts happen. Not as a moment you can explain, but as a calm you carry with you afterward. A subtle trust that didn't exist before. A sense that you don't have to push so hard anymore to be in the right place at the right time. If you're an Aquarius, you've always felt a little ahead, a little different, often alone in your way of seeing things. But tonight, or this morning, or this quiet moment you chose for yourself, you weren't alone. You were listening, and that matters. There is a gentle blessing in that, not from the stars, from your own readiness. May the steps you take from here feel lighter. May your decisions feel clearer. May what arrives next recognize the steadiness you've earned. You don't need to rush toward your future. It already knows how to meet you. If something in this journey resonated, if you felt understood without having to explain yourself, leave a comment below. Just a simple, I am ready, or I trust myself now. Not for me. For you. For this moment. And if this space feels like somewhere you want to return to, somewhere that speaks without noise and listens without judgment, you're always welcome here. Subscribe if you want to stay connected. There are more messages coming, different nights, different layers, but always grounded in the same truth. The journey doesn't end here, it softens and continues. Until the next message finds you, take care of your energy, trust your timing, and remember, your era didn't begin loudly. It began honestly, and that's how it will keep unfolding.